Hello everyone, in this recording I'm going to be speaking about this upcoming full moon that we have in the sign of Gemini on the 27th of November 2023. Now usually a Gemini full moon is a really good news because Gemini is the part of the sky where the moon is able to bring forward her most fun-loving, adolescent, juvenile qualities. So it is always, has something to do with a bit of humor, with a bit of fun, with a bit of, really interesting communication. But unfortunately, even though all of what I said might be in the picture one way or another, the predominant energy is not a very easy one, not a very, how should I say, a juvenile one, if that makes sense. Quite the contrary. It is asking from us to look at life and everything in it from the smallest aspect to the largest aspect in a very down to earth, mature and wise way, because otherwise we won't be able to make all that much sense in reality, regardless if that is more external or internal, basically our own truth, our own personal plans, timing, travel, etc., etc. Many expressions that have to do with this Gemini Sagittarius axis. Because, of course, whenever we are talking about a full moon, it's not just the sign where the moon is, so in this case, Gemini, but also its opposing sign, the opposite sign, because that's where the sun is illuminating the moon from. So in our case, it is Sagittarius. This full moon takes place at around 4 degrees and 51 minutes, so roughly 5 degrees of the sign of Gemini, so Gemini Sagittarian axis. And this also means that they will hold a T square with Saturn, Saturn being in fellow mutable sign, Pisces, at almost 1 degree. We can actually roughly say that it's 1 degree. The square isn't all that perfect by the degree, but it's more than operational. And also, the square is quite tight with Mars, because Mars is also in the picture, very, very close to the sun, which means it is opposing the moon as well at 2 degrees of the sign of Sagittarius. So Saturn square with Mars is much more exact, much more precise, and it matters much more in the sense that the ancients considered that both of these planets, Saturn and Mars, are the two malefics. So usually they bring, from a symbolic perspective, of course, misfortune, a conflict, not so very harmonious things do tend to take place when these two planets meet in a conversation of tension or any kind of friction. So this will be without a doubt the case at this full moon as well. So immediately, right off the bat, you don't really need to be an astrologer to make the correlation that verbal battles, harsh words, harsh truth, harsh information, harsh communication may really, really impact our lives at the time of this full moon. And this harsh information or communication actually serves our greatest good, because Saturn is the planet of structure. Saturn is the planet of what is allowed and what is not allowed, what is ideal in a very down to earth way, and what goes against that. So it's like a big, big reality check. I repeat, the Sun and Mars are still conjunct at this time of the full moon, so that makes it that much more intense in this way. Mars and the Sun are the two planets of combustion. If they meet another planet, they do tend to amplify and make its qualities, make its expression, its symbolism much more, like spicy, much more extreme. So right now, not only they are conjunct with one another. But let me just show you. A planetoid Ceres is also part of this conjunction. And Ceres herself is squaring Saturn to the degree. Ceres is the planetoid which has to do with nurture, which has to do with food, which has to do with any kind of nurture, even that which is not physical, like emotional nurture, spiritual nurture, psychological nurture. And she was also part of the Sun and Mars conjunction when it was in Scorpio. So these three planets kind of followed one another from Scorpio into Sagittarius. So regardless of how this plays out in our lives collectively and individually, it has something to do with the period, with the truth, with the information, with whatever happened in our lives the previous weeks when the Sun and Mars conjunction and Ceres, of course, was in Scorpio. What did we discover? What has crystallized within ourselves? What kind of deep truth or wisdom, personal truth have we found? Have we integrated into our being? This can also have a lot to do with elimination. For example, something in our lives might have came to a closure, to a termination, when it's no longer useful or it outlived its utility. So we came to the conclusion that we need to stop it, eliminate it, let it go, release it, terminate it, etc., etc. This Mars and Sun and Ceres conjunction can have also a lot to do with finances, money, managing debt, managing the resources that other people share with us, for example. So a lot of information, truth, plans, even concrete plans, might have been born within us during this Scorpio season. But now that both the Sun, Mars, and Ceres entered into Sagittarius, Sagittarius is the elevated expression in the sense that Scorpio is the truth seeker, right? It is digging deep to uncover the secrets, the mysteries, to hair split, to reveal everything that is there. And whatever it is that is being discovered, when the energies turn to Sagittarius, we are invited to elevate it, to do something faith-based, philosophical, or knowledge-based, or something really, really noble and elevated and Jupiterian with it. Now, let me just give you the basic example of this. There is like an investigation, I don't know, archaeological or scientific or experiments, anything like that, scorpionic. And the scientists, the team, whoever did it, reached a conclusion that's the scorpionic. They know what they researched. But when this energy turns into Sagittarius, then they have to write the papers. They have to integrate it into the academic world. They have to convince, this time not themselves, their mind, their sense of logic, but the fellow scientific community, the scientific world. So this is how usually, in a very concrete and real way, the energy of Scorpio and Sagittarius succeed one another, are built on one another. Even the symbol of Sagittarius in the sky, the arrow is aimed at the heart of the scorpion, so that it has to use its knowledge to a greater, elevated, divine purpose, Sagittarius ultimately, the home of Jupiter. So this is exactly why whatever we have discovered in Scorpio season, now we have to elevate it. Now we have to find a valid modus operandi. We have to pursue it. We have to go after it and find out the proper modus operandi. And this is exactly where the T square with Saturn comes into play, because that can represent the limitations. That can represent the blockages. That can represent where our ideals are very, very, very quickly shattered. Let me give you an example. In Scorpio season, I am going to manage my debt, my mortgages, or whatever financial minuses that I might have in my life. And I do some research, I come up with the plan. And, this time in Sagittarius season, time to execute. So I go to banks, I go to authorities, I go where I need to go, and I find out there that there is this legislation, there is that legislation, there are certain criterias that I have to fulfill in order for me to be able to do the rearrangement or the financial balancing out or whatever. So immediately we can see the disappointment, we can see the reality check, we can see the ideal turning into something concrete, but by a disillusionment. So, apply this pattern, apply this, symbolism to your own life, and you can quite easily anticipate how this might play out for you. But again, this can be also something to do with communication, something to do with a letter, an email, an information you receive from authorities, a change of legislation, a change of rules, a change of regulations, a change in methodology, with anything that has to do with institutions, with everything that has to do with official communication. Why? Because on one hand, that is Gemini, that is also Sagittarius, because Sagittarius rules the law. Anything that has to do with in a court of justice, anything that is legal in nature, even, certain rules and regulations that authorities, when communicating, when dealing with the public, they have to respect. All of that is Sagittarius. And at the same time, all of that is Saturn as well. The rules, the boss, the one who enforces the rules, so to speak. So especially Saturn in Pisces is where I'm so sorry, I can't help you until you bring me this paper, that paper, this and that and that. That this is one way how this energy can play out. But if we necessarily want to complicate things, that we can consider this a mutable grand cross, because Black Moon Lilith, not necessarily the true calculation of Black Moon Lilith, but the average one, is opposing Saturn. Black Moon Lilith being at 6 degrees of the sign of Virgo. So that's quite an operational T-square, both with the sun, Mars, and with the moon. So we can call this a grand cross if we really, really want to. So really, it's not a very easy energy, because Black Moon in the sign of Virgo can represent the nitty-gritty, the hair splitting, the fine details, when bureaucracy, when, oh, I just want to make this sure, is exaggerated, exasperating, when it is annoying us, when it is counterproductive, when we just get, how should I say, overrun by the, exactly as I said earlier, the nitty-gritty, the small, insignificant details. But if it's the law, if it's the rules, up to Virgo to follow it to the maximum, to follow it as close to perfection as it is possible. And also Black Moon Lilith in the sign of Virgo, well, our intellect, let's say our minds, our mental spheres are not going to be very friendly with the blockages, with the everything that basically stops us in our track, everything extra that we need to fill, so there's this part of this energy. Now the other side, another possible expression how this can play out, well, that's Mars, really. Mars and Sun conjunction. Now Mars squaring Black Moon Lilith, Mars squaring Saturn as well, and them squaring the moon, that means conflict, that means angry words, That means I cannot believe that you did this. I cannot believe that you said this. A breakdown in communication where there might be some misunderstanding as well. We need to mention that the ruling planet of this full moon is Mercury, and Mercury himself holds an exact, almost to the minute even, square with Neptune. So you can imagine that's the heaviest of the energies, because that means strong disillusionment or disappointment, or the actual reality is the total opposite to what we imagined it, Scorpio, especially when we motivated ourselves, when we ambitioned ourselves. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna achieve it. I'm gonna follow this and that. I'm gonna invest effort. While trying to do that, it is exactly where we meet the blockages, or that reality is totally different than we imagined it. So we can, of course, with Gemini and Saturn being a fellow mutable and dual sign of Pisces, it can be absolutely any way. Because let's not forget, Gemini is very much about options, the two sides of the coin, but which we need to use equally. Because the glyph of Gemini, they are connected. You know, it's almost like a gateway, almost like a, I don't even know, like a gate, really. That is the glyph of Gemini. So we need to use both of this information in a way that it works for us. So even if it's like a misunderstanding which leads to conflict, which leads to angry words, which may lead to a battle of opinions, and this can be very, very, very passionate. And it can even lead in some cases to fist fight. Why not? Gemini rules the hand, and Mars opposes this moon in Gemini. So Gemini is very non-conformistic. And Gemini, it has a third decan co-ruled by Uranus, which means it is very, very impulsive. Of course, the moon is in the first decan, no problem at all, ruled by Mercury, but Mercury is also in a very, very difficult position. So our feelings are gonna be wishy-washy, because, you know, we will not like the reality check, the disappointment that we get. But what to do with this energy? Well, on one hand, we need to keep the scorpionic determination, because that's not going anywhere. The scorpionic determination is our inner truth, our needs, and identifying that we need to do this and this and that in our lives. That's absolutely fine. But this is where the Sagittarius comes into play. Sagittarius would like everything to be ideal. Sagittarius would like everything to go quickly and for it to catapult us to a very elevated state. Yet the squares are not permissive of this. So we get the other expression, the frustration that it's not the way I imagined it. It's 10 times harder that I even thought. Or if we want to convince someone, if there is like a discussion, like a dialogue, like a communication, well, as I said, there can be very, very many misunderstandings. So the effort, and Black Moon, Lilith, and Virgo, the hair splitting that we need to be good psychologists. We need to be very understanding. We need to be our very, very best and friendliest selves in order to make a very, very difficult communication or misunderstanding clear up and, you know, be in our favor. But of course, the other choice is to be aggressive, to be willful, to say angry words, to speak out our truth in a radical way. That can also have certain effects. You know what I mean? On the other hand, the Sabian symbol of this 4-5 degrees of Gemini is a radical magazine. I do believe that says everything. You know, a radical magazine, in its very nature, it breaks the social norm. It breaks the rules of society. Yet on the other hand, it becomes exactly because of that extraordinarily popular. So we do something outside of our comfort zone. We do something radically. We do something very, very intensely. But exactly this is why we need to be in control. Think before we speak. Think before we react to words, to communication, or other people's feelings. Neptune in Pisces squaring Mercury in Sagittarius. Because if we invest this great radicalness, if that even makes sense, into patience, into higher intelligence, into being our exaggerated wise version of the self, that can also be a potential that is very, very okay, because it will get us a long way. But it's hard. It's very, very, very hard. We can very well choose to be our angriest and most peed off Gemini. I'm so sorry about this self, where we just spit back every toxic word that we get. That also solves the situation in one hand, and that is also very radical, and that also implies a lot of energy investment. So this is why we really, really need to choose a more tempered expression of this energy, regardless of where the challenge comes from. Now, collectively speaking, it is so obvious what will happen. Gemini, media, multimedia, mainstream media, social media, words, news reporters, communication, but official communication. So there is going to be big, big, big debates and heated discussions and verbal battles and a lot of confusion, a lot of name calling. And no, Mercury in Sagittarius, so it's exiled. You know what I mean? Squaring Saturn. So Mercury is uncomfortable as it is in Sagittarius, and it's aggressed by Saturn. Sorry, by Neptune, not Saturn, by Neptune, sorry. And it's also in shadow. It will not go retrograde yet, but it's on its shadow path. So you can imagine everything is a lie. Absolutely everything is gonna feel like a lie, like a deception, like a half truth. We will simply not know what and who to trust. Sometimes not even ourselves. Why? Because of the Saturnian reality checks. Saturn squaring Mars. Because we have to still make it. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter what obstacles are thrown before us. We still have to find a practical way to get to where we need to be. Remember the Scorpio season. What is our greatest goal, our greatest desire, our greatest need, what we need to accomplish for the sake of progress or whatever is important for us. What is that? And that needs to be readapted in order to work for us, despite all the reality checks. So Mars and Saturn would like to just fight it through. What is the obstacle? This, I'm just gonna demolish it and break it down. Mars in the sign of Aries, like a ram. Just try and headbutt it until it, chances are that's not gonna work. On the world stage, there will be clashes, don't worry. That energy will play out without a shadow of a doubt. However, individually, we need to be much wiser and find, mutable energy. Be our most adaptable and mutable selves to find a way around the problem. Because let me just give an example. Let's say if the problem is legal, the legislation changed, or there are some extra requirements, then we will arm ourselves with patience and perhaps go and consult a legal advisor, and immediately we are a step forward. That's and then when we know exactly where we stand and what we need to do, That's when our hopes, our Sagittarian energy can come back online in its most elevated way because we solved the problem at least mentally. So again, Mercury squaring Neptune. We must make sure that whatever this disillusionment, disappointment, or confusion, even when we just don't know what to believe and who to believe anymore, or when we simply don't see the solution to our problem happening in a timely or in a you know ideal manner, it doesn't really matter as long as we don't give way too much feeling to it and try to be hopeful and positive. Of course, this has another expression to it where, due to, let's say, escapism or a little bit way too much positive psychology, we are blind to the reality check and we live in the dream world. Oh, it's gonna just drop down from the sky. That is also a bad choice, because when the reality check comes, we need to pay attention. Just from a mature and from a supportive attitude, not the angry adolescent Gemini, neither the angry, I don't know, university professor Sagittarius, neither the angry spiritualist and spiritual counselor Saturn and Pisces, neither the angry HR manager Black Moon Lilith in the sign of Virgo. You know what? We must not be these things, because this energy can have a lot of positive to it as well, because at this time, if you look at my screen, Venus is conjunct the South Node. Venus is the ruling planet of Libra. She is at home. Yes, of course, she is nearing her opposition to the North Node as well, which is not a very easy energy. But at least, Venus in her home, in her own sign, gives us a certain kind of emotional, value-based, even heart level clarity of what we need to do in our lives, at least in the big picture, because the nodes of the moon are our karmic path forward and also what we need to release from the past. Venus highlights everything that we need to release from the past, and that is more specifically the South Node in the sign of Libra, old way of connecting to people, old way of forming relationships, old way of taking care of legal issues, old ways of holding together one-on-one alliances, partnerships, contract, anything legal, and the way we feel and think about love and what we deserve in that sense, because it opposes the North Node and Aries as well. So Venus's old patterns are being eliminated. So of course, we can react to a totally new and fresh way to the challenges, to whatever Mercury square Neptune will block us with. So even though, Venus activating the South Node is not the easiest energy, in the sense that legally there is going to be a lot of debate. Which old legislation, old laws don't work anymore, or what is not being respected and discarded. Why? Because the Gemini full moon, again, going back to the Sabian symbol, a radical magazine, breaking all the rules, can mean that as well. Because the opposite is Sagittarius, Sun and Mars and Ceres in Sagittarius, breaking all the rules. Which rules, which legislation, what aspect of the law is not working or is ignored? So this is a big part of, politically speaking, economically speaking, anything to do with work. But when I say work, it's like collectively speaking, the HR industry, the work industry. There is going to be so many contradictory discussions and political fights and battles on TV, newspaper, internet. So politicians are going to definitely tear into each other's flesh in that sense. But at the same time, it will be very, very clear to all of us what it is that we need to release. what it is that no longer is working in our world, in our personal lives, in our inner world. So this is how we change, this is how we adapt. And again, that almost an erratic Pluto is revealing all of the political corruption in big corporations, big whatever, anything, top-down authority. So we really, really need to pay attention to whatever is happening, but not in a way of what is being shoved up, presented to us by news and the internet and social media, because chances are that is so very, very half true in a way that we cannot trust it. This time all we can trust is our internal common sense, that inner GPS connected to nature, not the internet, not what we hear on the news, and not even what our, I don't know who told us from own personal life experience, because the past in a navigatory sense is not valid anymore, because we are in a new paradigm where reality doesn't work the way it used to in the past. So the big wisdom, not in a spiritual way, but in, let's say, in a life experience way, the big wisdom of our forefathers or our ancestors, grandpa, grandma, mom and dad is not viable anymore, because this is a different world, different times, times that no one knows exactly what they are even yet. So this is where all we can trust is our own inner intelligence, that which nature offers to us. Just like geese and ducks and whatever you want find their way from one continent to the other in a precise, clear manner. That kind of powerful electromagnetic guidance, if you will, also lies within us. So we need to really, really base on ourselves on that. Higher intuition may not work very well at this moment. Mercury squaring Neptune. This is where our minds will not be able to make sense of our intuition. Even if our intuition is not lying, our mind just can't decipher it, or it can decipher it excessively. This is where you might not even know what to think. That's how many symbols you are seeing. So we need to detach from that, distance ourselves to that, and drop into the gut feeling, the instinctual intelligence within us. The divine very many times speaks in symbols, but when it is crucial that we have understanding, the divine doesn't speak in symbols anymore. The divine is direct. So that is why we must not question our intuition. If it's hazy, if it's confusing, if it's misty, just discard it. Because the divine, the true divine, doesn't speak in mystery when we need it the most. Then we can drop into our gut feeling, our instinctual intelligence, the inner animal that just knows. The highest expression of Scorpio, for example, the highest expression even of Aries, with Chiron, with the North Node and planetoid Aries in it. So yes, this is a very, very, very important time, even though, as I said, there is a lot of positivity in the sky. For example, Venus sextile Mercury, persuasive words. Now that we got to persuasive words part, I would just like to give a warning. This aspect favors scammers, criminals, thieves, deceivers, liars, narcissists, very, very, very much. Because Mercury is in shadow. So don't believe the emails and watch your goods and possessions, because you might be a victim of a thievery or con or deception if you're not careful. But ignoring this part, it is really, really good for, as I said, persuasion, business, figuring stuff out. The reality check, especially if it's business, is just a blessing because we know the facts. The Venus sextile Mercury gives us a way to figure it out still. Jupiter, trines Black Moon Lilith. Again, knowing our Virgo is the gut. Black Moon Lilith can represent our instinctual feeling when we just know what is in our instinct, which direction. Trine Jupiter, exactly, the justice is there. The right path can be in our guts as long as we don't give way to aggression, anger, non-conformistic expression in a very, very radical way. So we offend everyone with our own truth. So we must make sure that our opinion, our communication, our words, our self-expression, even non-verbal ones, don't cause wounds, don't cause a lot of damage which we cannot repair later on. So we must really, really embody our wisest self and work with this energy. Whatever is being revealed to us by this Gemini full moon, because a full moon always sheds light on something. Even if it's a change in our plans, change in our travel plans, cancellation of a travel, inconvenience. It's like a Mercury retrograde period, really. And there is the Mercury square Neptune, where something disillusions us. When that which we were so excited about not so long, a few days or week ago, now is seen through a totally different kind of perspective, a heavier, is it true, is it not true? We need to take control and truly choose how we react. You know what I mean? And then we can actually turn this full moon into something very, very positive. We're just like a master juggler. If we juggle and balance everything that is around us out to the maximum of our capabilities, we will feel like, like a superhero who, with their intelligence but also self-discipline, adapted to a situation which otherwise would have been totally crippling. So if we use the power of our intellect plus heart plus maturity and wisdom, Mercury square Neptune, then we can really, really make something very, very positive with this, regardless of how uncomfortable it may be. And even if everyone around us is on the edge, coming with angry words, angry communication, impatience, or, as I say, misunderstandings, this is where we really, really need to tune into our wisest self and try our hardest to navigate through this period, regardless of how it reshapes and reforms, that changes our plans that crystallize within us not that long ago, a week ago, 2 weeks ago, when these planets were in the sign of Scorpio. So thank you everyone for listening. Thank you for all the love and all the support. If you like this and found this useful, please like and share, or you can donate in the PayPal link in the description below. With this being said, wishing everyone a blessed full moon. Please remember to stay calm, to be patient, and not react in an angry way. Until next time, bye for now.